Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 16. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Hello and welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I just have to say thank you. So many of you have reached out to me after episode 14 on lessons learned, and you shared with me that maybe you have some of the same struggles that I do about being vulnerable and zipped up. So we're in this journey together. Keep the comments coming. If you've not been to the website, that is a great place to have a dialogue. It is hustleandflowpodcast.com. And there are comments for every episode. Some of you have also reached out privately, but thank you for, one, letting me know that you're listening, and two, for sharing with me your struggles as well. So let's jump into today's episode, and it is all about personality tests. So I am a personality test junkie, and I know there are others out there as well. And then I run into people that haven't taken any personality tests and they don't know about them. And I'm like, what? They're so much fun and they're really helpful. So what I'm going to do today, by the way, there are so many out there. We can't possibly cover them all. But what I am going to share with you, it's kind of my top recommendations for personality tests and why you would use them. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't others out there that are also good. They're just not my favorite. But, your preference doesn't have to be mine. So the key is just to find the ones that are most helpful to you. But I'm going to unzip a little today and share with you some of my personality stuff and really, I guess some of the struggles that I've had in embracing my personality. So let's just jump in. There are 4 that I want to talk about today. And now most people have at least heard of Myers-Briggs, although I think we often don't know what it actually means or stands for. So it originates from Carl Jung's psychological types, the theory that he came up with, but the MBTI, which is the indicator, that was really developed by Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers. And they started coming up with this during World War II because they thought that it would help women, that were having to enter the workforce for the first time, identify what would be the best job for them, what would be most comfortable and effective. So that's really how it got started, but it's become so mainstream that most people know what it is. But because this was developed so long ago, and there's not really, a company that you can go to that is certifying this. You can find a ton of free tests online. Although there are some companies that do provide certification, it's not from Myers-Briggs, if that makes sense. And I know someone that does this work. And if you guys are interested, I may actually have her on as a guest host to kind of walk through all of the details of Myers-Briggs, and then you can, take the test with a certified expert if you'd like. So if you're interested in that, let me know and I'll have her on. But Myers-Briggs really looks at, there's 16 personality types. So you're either an E or an I, that's the first letter, and E means that you are extroverted, and I means you are introverted. And when you take these tests, they'll give you a percentage as well. So, we all have a little bit of everything. It's just what's most dominant. So, for example, I am an E, but I'm only 55%. And it doesn't mean that, I don't really enjoy being around people all the time. It just means that I also really need time by myself. It's really, the extrovert versus introvert is about what drains your energy versus gives you energy. And I think sometimes we get that confused. But so that's the first one, E versus I. And then the second is sensing versus intuitive. The third is thinking versus feeling. And the fourth is judging versus perceiving. So depending on what is more dominant for you in each of those 4 categories, you are then assigned a letter. And there are then 16 personality types. I am an ESTJ. For those of you that don't know anything about Myers-Briggs, ESTJ is a very strong personality. A lot of different tests will call them the supervisor. They kind of just know things and do things. And I'm like, how do I even put a positive spin on this? So here's the thing. If you go to, there's always these charts that will take some kind of theme and put it to the personality type. I've seen some really funny ones, but there's a Star Wars one that was going around, and ESTJ is Darth Vader, which is terrible. I mean, hello, who wants to be Darth Vader? And yet, this is my personality type. So, it is the second most common personality type for men. For men. But only 6% of women have this personality type. And honestly, I think it explains a lot about my career. I don't shy away from the fact that the reason why I was probably so successful and the reason why I received so many awards and was promoted to management was because I had a very masculine personality. And I believe that we unconsciously try to bring people up and recognize people that are like us because it makes us feel better. And so when we talk about implicit bias, yes, most white men are naturally going to see traits in other white men that reminds them of themselves, and they're going to pull them up. I fully appreciate that because I am an ESTJ, that when they were looking for some kind of diversity, when they were looking for, we really need to promote a woman, it was easy for them to say, let's bring Heather along because of all the other women in the room, she acts most like us. Now, I don't know that they had the conversation in those terms because, again, this is generally unconscious. It's implicit. But I don't think that I was able to rise to the top just because I was, brilliant or a hard worker or anything like that. I fully appreciate that it probably is because I have a similar personality to them. But that doesn't always put me in the best position to be accepted by women, or at least that was my perception. And I've had this perception since I was a very small child. When I was a little girl, I didn't really play with dolls and I didn't want to play house. I didn't enjoy those things. I wanted to be outside running around in nature and playing football with the boys. And so I think sometimes I was perceived as being, cold or standoffish or, too good for others, when the truth was that's just where I felt most comfortable. And so I feel like I've always really struggled with my personality. And I think we are born with it, right? We can get into all kinds of psychology on the nurture versus nature, but I think I was born with this personality, and it's not a common personality for women to have, which has helped me in many ways, I think, especially in the, corporate world. But it's also held me back from being able to fully bond with other women that don't feel that way. And I want to be accepted. I want to be part of the club. And I think sometimes when, you just are that personality, I still don't think I'm Darth Vader, but it can create barriers. And so I don't know what your personality is, but to the extent that you also feel like maybe sometimes you're an outsider, or maybe you were just born with a personality that is completely unaligned with what your ambition is, right? So if in the corporate world, and they say ESTJs are likely going to rise to the top and be your supervisors and running companies. So what if you're not an ESTJ, but you still want to do that? Then you may feel that same tension because you want to be authentic. You want to show up as who you are, but others may not accept you in that role if they have preconceived notions about what that means. So I think that Myers-Briggs even though it's been around for a long time, I think it's pretty good. And I think it can give you some insight as to not only just the personality you were born with, whether you like it or others like it, it is what it is, but having some kind of understanding as to where you fit in compared to the general population can be super helpful and eye-opening. And part of all of these personality tests, it's not just so that you can get more information about yourself. It's so that you can know how to better interact with others. So, for example, if you can pick up on or know, especially in your teams, in workplaces, you can have your employees take these tests, and it's super helpful for you to then know that if you operate in a certain way and they operate in another way, it just allows you to meet each other where you are, as opposed to trying to push your personality, your values, your tendencies on them. So if you don't know your personality, again, you can take a free test, or if you're interested, let me know and I'll have Monica come on the show. Okay, so let's talk about the second personality test that I think you might find really useful, and that is Gallup Strengths Finders. I think we're all familiar with the Gallup organization as a company that does research and surveys and polling. And they developed, after doing a lot of different research related to what makes people successful, what makes companies successful, they developed their own test to help you identify your strengths. And they've identified 34 natural talents that are super helpful that you can bring to the table in a corporate situation. And when I say corporate, I'm using that loosely, but this really isn't on a personal level. It is definitely intended for how you perform in the workplace. And for that reason, it's very popular in the corporate world. They've had over 16 million people take this test, and they have all kinds of statistics on how it makes your employees more engaged. There's less turnover. They have higher sales, higher productivity. Presumably that's all true. But the idea is they have certified coaches where you can take the test online, and I'll put a link for that in the show notes. I think it's going to cost you about $15 right now. You can also buy the book, StrengthsFinder 2.0, and it has an access code in it. It's about the same cost. I think it's like $14, $15, $16 on Amazon. So if you want the book to go with it, you can get it. Although the book, it's going to go into all of the strengths, and most people just are interested in their own. So if you are leading a team and you would like to know about all of them, then you might want to buy the book. But so they have these strengths, and the research behind it shows that when you show up with your strengths, even more, you do better in your job than if you identify your weaknesses and try to improve them. And I really do like that concept. I like the research behind it. And so I 100% agree with it. And I think it's something that you really should know about yourself if you don't already know it. So I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to my Darth Vader personality, and StrengthsFinder kind of supports it. So my very best strength, what comes naturally to me that shows up well in business, is competition. I am highly competitive. And that is not always seen as a good thing, especially among women. My second strength is significance. Now, we had a partners retreat at my firm, my last firm, and I had already taken this test, but we were taking the test as a group as well. And we were sitting down having lunch before we were getting ready to get into it. And there were several of us sitting around, but, and everybody's sharing their strengths. Everybody's curious. And one of the partners sitting beside me, she was like, oh my gosh. She goes, how embarrassing would it be, though, if one of your strengths was significance? I mean, that one sounded terrible. How conceited do you have to be? To which I had to say, that's my second strength. It's embarrassing. It's so embarrassing to me, at least, to have some of these personality traits, these natural strengths that are viewed by others as not good things. She then was apologetic, but She was like, I just don't even believe that that's you because you're nice. Because you're nice. And people say that about the competition thing as well. They're like, but you're nice. So, the preconceived notion is, that those things are bad, that those people, are cutthroat and that they hurt you. But that's not who I am at all. And I think I have a really good reputation among the bar because I've always tried to hold myself out as someone that was easy to get along with, even if I'm a zealous advocate, and helps others. So I'm not just competitive for myself. I'm competitive on behalf of others. And just because I'm competitive doesn't mean that I'm trying to beat you. It means I'm just playing the game. I enjoy the game. But I totally get that makes a lot of people feel really uncomfortable. And so, for example, on significance, it literally starts, if you go to the Gallup website, it starts with significance. You want to be very significant in the eyes of other people. In the truest sense of the word, you want to be recognized. You want to be heard. You want to stand out. And it's true. I do. And again, I'm really nervous talking about this right now. My body is completely tense because people don't like that. But that's how, I was born. That's part of my personality. And honestly, I think some people have to feel that way or there would be no one standing out. There would be no one taking charge. There would be no one willing to put up with the nonsense that goes with standing out. So anyway, those are my top two strengths. And my others, they're strategic, relator, and futuristic. And futuristic means that you're very big picture. You can see the future. You can visualize things very easily. You don't really get caught up in those details of right now, and you don't focus too much on the past. On the relator piece, just to kind of give you some context into this test, relator means that you can get along with others easily, but that you have few friendships. Now, the friendships you have are really deep, but you don't have a ton of friends in your circle. And I think that may go hand in hand with what I was talking about on episode 14 about others telling me I'm zipped up. It's hard for me to trust people enough to really open up. There are very few people on this planet that know me super well. And me even sharing that with you is way outside my comfort zone. Because I am a people person. I do like people. I love the people that I'm around, but I don't often truly open up or, really get to be known on a deep level except for just a few people. And I think that that's maybe sometimes seen as a bad thing. And so I probably try to cover that up to some extent, although Gallup recognizes it as a strength. Someone that can get along with almost anyone, partly because maybe you're not always talking or sharing, but being able to get along with anyone, but having few deep relationships, for them is considered a strength. So is significance and competition. I don't think people have too many issues with being strategic or futuristic, but when society or culture tells you, or your family or your friends tell you that you need to change, that you should be different, it can be difficult because when that is who you are, it's difficult to show up in a different way to make them feel more comfortable. So Gallup says, embrace it. Just embrace that those are your strengths and bring those to the table and own them. And while I do definitely bring them to the table, I probably don't own them that much because I'm not super proud of them. But again, StrengthsFinder is a great test. Go take it. Again, the link will be in the bio. It will give you some insight as to what comes naturally to you and what you can really bring to the table in your job. So if you look at that and you're not doing it right now in your current position, then you need to find ways to begin to incorporate it. And if you have some that maybe you're a little embarrassed about too, know that you are not alone. And we are to consider these as strengths. We are going to try to embrace them. Okay, moving on. Number 3, you can't just go take this one. It's called Caliper. And it was started for insurance salesmen. But again, over 1 million people have taken it. And, I have talked about Dr. Larry Richard before. He is a psychologist and a lawyer and just a really good person. And he is certified and can give this test to you. So I don't know if he just does it for individuals that reach out, but you could always look him up and see if he would do that for you. And again, I'm happy to bring him on the show if you think that would be helpful. So you guys can let me know that in the comments. But so Caliper, it's not really a personality test and it's not your strengths. It's just how you show up. And so they have different areas, 4 different areas. One is leadership, one is interpersonal, one is problem solving, decision making, and the other is personal organization, time management. And then within each, they have different categories. But with this, some of it is personality driven, some of it is strengths driven, but sometimes it gives you feedback that you can work on. Because unlike Myers-Briggs and strengths, which are basically not supposed to change, like they are, it's who you are. It's your natural tendencies. It's what you're good at. That doesn't change. With Caliper, you can actually work on some of these things, not all of them, but if you know how you come across, then you can work on them. And they made a huge difference for me when I was in a leadership position. And, Dr. Larry Richard was a huge help in giving me materials and resources that would help me with some of my, we'll call problem areas. So this kind of goes hand in hand with the other stuff. I scored very high on assertiveness and aggressiveness, which aren't surprising. I scored a 98 on urgency, which means I'm probably the most impatient person you've ever met. But that can show up in not a great way when, you just want to get results. You are just focused on getting things done. Sometimes you don't stop to say, hello, how are you doing? So he helped me with that. I also scored very high on risk taking compared to lawyers in general, which probably explains why I started my own business. And people are like, where did you find the courage to do that? To me, it wasn't that courageous, but it could just be because I'm more willing to take risks than I think most lawyers. But something that I scored really, really low on, and he's done a lot of research on this, so apparently this is not uncommon, was resilience. I scored like a 4 or a 6 or something. It was something crazy on resilience. When we were in this leadership program and he starts with, everybody, you got your results. Everybody already knows this about you, so you don't have to hide it. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. Did anyone feel like any of the results were wrong? And I'm like, yeah. So this says that I have no resilience, and that's complete BS. I am extremely resilient. Like if you knock me down, I'm jumping right back up, and I've got thick skin and I'm not backing down. I mean, I'm resilient. And so I started arguing with him as to why this was just so wrong. And I was like so upset that it was wrong. And he's so funny. He was like, well, if you're so resilient, why are you taking your resiliency score so personal? Oh, I hate when I'm wrong. We all laughed. And so to this day, like the people that went through that group, we all laugh about my low resiliency and how I challenged the doctor. And he so gently put me in my place. But apparently a lot of lawyers do not have resiliency. And I have actually now seen him give these presentations in front of large rooms with like over 1,000 people. And there are always people in the audience that totally disagree. It's the only thing they can focus on. They roll their eyes. They will get up. They'll take the microphone. They will challenge him. They're like, lawyers are some of the most resilient people I know. It just proves his point, which is apparently we're not. So even though we're really strong and thick-skinned on the outside, we take things really personally on the inside. And that was helpful for me to know. And so anyway, to the extent that maybe you internalize a lot of things, that is something that you can absolutely work on. And I have made great strides in that area, having learned that that was a weakness of mine. So Caliper is great for identifying areas that may not show up well in the workplace and in your personal life, because if you've got low resilience and it means you're internalizing things, then you're taking a lot of that home with you and it creates stress and anxiety. So this is a great one if you just want to improve and get a better feel for how you might be perceived in the workplace. And then the last one that I want to share with you, and this is my favorite one. Oh, so by the way, let me back up. So Dr. Richard, he said when he was doing my analysis, he said that basically my Caliper scores reflected that I was a bull in a china shop, right? And he wasn't being mean, but this goes hand in hand with this concept of, Darth Vader. And people are like, but you're nice, which indicates that my natural tendencies are not something that they think are nice. And then you've got Bull in the China Shop. And it totally fits in with, when I was growing up, I received so many comments from family and church members and teachers and other parents telling me to basically stop being so big. I mean, that's really stop being so big and so bold and so loud. Just tame it down. Can you tame down your personality? And so I think in many ways I try to, because I'm so cognizant of the fact that others don't feel comfortable with it. So Via really helped me recognize that there's a lot more to me than just what is seen on the outside. Right? So what I'm talking about with Myers-Briggs, Gallup, and Caliper, that's all about what's on the outside, what people see, the way you're projecting. Via, it is all about how you feel on the inside. And honestly, isn't that what's most important? It shouldn't be what others think of you. It should be how you feel about yourself. And Via is really what allowed me to embrace the part of me that I had basically ignored because I didn't think it was real, because the feedback that I was getting was, something different. So Via comes out of the University of Pennsylvania, their positive psychology program, and it stands for values and action. Now they call them character strengths. I personally think they're more motivators, because you may not actually be good at these things. They may not come natural to you, but they fill you up. They bring you joy. And I like to say they bring color to the picture, right? If Myers-Briggs and StrengthsFinder and Caliper, if they're drawing the picture, Via gives it color. And it's what really makes you unique. And they're all positive, which is going to allow you to say, oh, I feel good about that. Maybe I can increase my self-worth by allowing these beautiful colors to fill in that picture. So here's what I found out when I took the Via test. What brings me the most joy, what fills me up, is number 1, creativity. Number 2, humor. Creativity and humor drive me. That's what gives me so much joy. And those things don't really fit in with everything I've described to you so far. But part of that is because you can't just put someone in a box. And I think that's sometimes what we do with these personality tests. We forget that there's a real human, that there's a person behind those 16 areas or those 34 strengths, those talents. I love to have fun and I love to laugh. It doesn't mean that I'm funny, but I don't take myself that seriously. Yes, I'm a competitive person. Yes, I want to be significant, but I'm very lighthearted. And I think that that makes a huge difference. And it's probably why people say, but you're nice. I'm also very creative. So yeah, I am apparently the second most common male personality, but creativity, that's feminine energy. I don't just do things the way others do them. I'm challenging the status quo. I'm innovative. And that's very different, right? That's very different than the other things that I was talking about earlier in the episode. And so the other 3, they all give you your top 5. So the others are wisdom, although the test has changed. And I think they now call that perspective. So perspective, and I've always been an old soul, so that makes sense. Social intelligence and social justice. So what fills me up, what really motivates me, is equality and fairness. So I may be competitive, but I am deeply driven by equality and fairness. That's who I am. Perspective. Perspective is about seeing the bigger picture and being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Now, it's not the same as empathy. So it doesn't mean that, you're taking on their stuff or that you feel their pain, but you have perspective. And you can often, and this is why, so for example, if things are going crazy, I'm always really calm. And it's because I can generally see that bigger picture. I have perspective. And I think it's why I've always had people that are much older than me come to me for advice. That gives me joy, right? Which makes sense that I would want to coach. And then social intelligence. Social intelligence is about being able to interact with people. So even though I don't have a ton of friends, even though I don't let people see me a lot, I am really filled up with joy, and I'm really motivated by being able to have relationships with others that make them feel good. And it's not in a conniving or deceiving way. Like, that actually gives me joy to be able to be in a room with people and connect with them, even if it's not super deep, right? Even if I'm not sharing a ton, there's a lot of social and emotional intelligence there that drives me. And so when I was able to see these things, and by the way, they have some doppelganger lists, and, they had like Oprah and Gandhi, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. Because I care about these things, and I'm not just this hard charging corporate masculine person. And that really provided a lot of color for me. It allowed me to embrace my strengths in a way that felt good, because even though I was nervous telling you about some of those other things, it was because I hadn't yet shared the color with you. I hadn't yet shared that context with you. And it's important. It is so important. So if you struggle with maybe putting your own personality and strengths together, I strongly encourage you to take that VIA test to let you know what just brings you joy and motivation. And again, try to make sure you're doing that on a daily basis in your job and at home. And again, I'll put that survey also in the show notes so that you can go take it. So again, there are many tests out there. There's DISC. You probably already know I'm a strong D. True Colors, Love Languages, 5 Voices, the archetypes. Just do what works for you. And most people will have some kind of aha moment with the test that resonates the most with them. So I definitely encourage you to try personality tests out if you haven't before. They can be super helpful. And I thank you for allowing me to share with you a little bit more about my personality and my struggles with embracing it. So there you go. We have covered personality tests for today. Thank you for joining me. You can head on over to the show notes. That's going to be hustleandflowpodcast.com/16. Leave me some comments. Take these tests. Let me know how you've scored or how you felt about how others perceive you and your personality before, and whether you feel like there's a missing link. Maybe VIA will provide that for you. So come join me in the discussion. Thank you so much, and I look forward to connecting next week. Are you feeling stuck or frustrated in your career? Are you exhausted from trying to balance so many competing demands? Do you have big dreams and goals, but no time to focus on them? Then join me in a small group of female attorneys for the Life and Law in Balance retreats at Miraval. They're coming up in June and September. To learn more and register, go to lifeandlawinbalance.com. I'd love to meet you there.